Okay, so welcome to everyone that's joining. I see our participant count going up as we just start today's lecture. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicholas Manousis. I'm the Executive Director of the Horological Society of New York, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to our October lecture. And as usual, let's get started with a couple announcements. Because of the pandemic, all of our in-person classes and lectures are canceled for the foreseeable future. Instead, HSNY is offering virtual horological education classes and holding virtual lectures like this one. While we miss seeing everyone in person, we are looking forward to turning this difficult situation into a positive way forward. At the end of tonight's lecture, we will have time for questions. You can submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A functionality. And remember, you can rearrange the video windows on your screen if we are blocking any of the slides. Now on to today's lecture. I remember the first time I learned about Ferdinand Berthoud. My wife and I were visiting Paris, and we spent an afternoon at the Musée des Arts et Métiers, which in English is the Museum of Arts and Crafts. This museum has a large horology section, really an impressive museum. And in this section, I found this unusual looking timekeeper mounted on a gimbal system. It was one of Ferdinand Berthoud's marine chronometers. And it opened my eyes to this horologist's incredible life. Today, we'll be taking a close look at Ferdinand Berthoud's history and modern developments with Karl-Friedrich Scheufele, President of Ferdinand Berthoud, and Vincent Lapaire, General Manager of Chronometry Ferdinand Berthoud. Now, the agenda for today's lecture will begin with an introduction, and then we'll take a look at Ferdinand Berthoud's legacy. And then we're going to jump into to modern times and look at the new chronometer FB2RE. So we'll start with our introduction. And I'm very pleased to welcome to the Horological Society of New York, Mr. Karl-Friedrich Scheufele, President of Chronometry Ferdinand Berthoud. Please take it away.
Well, thank you for the introduction. It is an honor and a pleasure for Mr. Lapaire and myself to present Ferdinand Berthoud, or the adventure, we could almost call it, of reviving Ferdinand Berthoud, the famous Swiss, I would say Swiss-French watchmaker. We would, of course, have preferred to do this in person in New York, and this was originally planned, but I think at least we are able to communicate this way, and we are very happy that we found a slot to do this tonight for us in Geneva and today for you in New York or elsewhere. Well, if I have to tell you in a nutshell the story of how I got introduced to Ferdinand Berthoud and how I really got to know the subject, it all started with the foundation of the Chopin Manufacture in Fleurier back in 1996, when we decided, and there I'm speaking about Chopin, when we decided to start again the manufacture of our own movements. And basically from scratch, we built this manufacture, of which you can see a picture. And this was really the basis that allowed us to venture out into the Berthoud project. And the Berthoud project really came up also due to the fact that I decided to feature what was a family collection of watches and clocks, and to subsequently open a museum in the manufacture in Fleurier. Here you can see a picture. And this museum really features watch and clock making since the very beginning, with a special section about precision clocks and precision pocket watches and of course, marine chronometers. Now, when you speak about marine chronometers, you end up meeting Berthoud one way or another. And this is exactly what happened to me. I was looking at different editions that we could maybe acquire to show more of the marine chronometers. And I came across the very first Ferdinand Berthoud watch that I ever saw. And that was only the beginning of, I would say, a big passion of mine, where I discovered a watchmaker that was actually born a few kilometers away from Fleurier and made his whole career in Paris. Now, Mr. Lapaire will go into detail afterwards, but what you can see on this picture is basically a very important aspect of what really sparked my passion, was the fact that Berthoud was a watchmaker that wanted to share his knowledge. And he published a number of books, and these books actually allowed us subsequently to reimagine or to imagine on how a Berthoud watch of today could really look like. So the acquisition of the name Berthoud, and that is another story in itself, happened in 2006. And basically, when I was getting more and more acquainted with Berthoud, I obviously checked who owned the name Berthoud. And I came across someone who actually worked with the Chopin group at the time, and who proudly showed me what he was going to do in terms of products for Berthoud. And what really pushed me in making an offer for the name was that I really didn't want him to build watches the way he thought he would, because that would have been an insult to Ferdinand Berthoud. So I managed to secure the name, the rights to the name, and subsequently didn't really yet know which course to take and how to revive the name. And so basically this took until 2013, when we founded the Chronométrie Ferdinand Berthoud, based also in Fleurier. And when we set about what would become the first Berthoud, the first contemporary Berthoud timepiece, the FB1, which was presented in 2015. Now, obviously, we started already back in 2009, 2010, with the design process, with the research and development process and everything else. And the foundation of the actual company was really a formality more than the kick-off date when we started with the project. The project in itself was a very exciting and very enriching process, because the fundamental question we ask ourselves: what would Berthoud have done if he was asked to design a modern wristwatch? And this was really what you saw coming out in 2015 was really the result of this quest. And basically, the fact that we won a very important prize, a very important recognition, only a year later, 2016, at the Grand Prix de l'Horlogerie in Geneva, I think was proof that somehow we did the right thing. But if someone asked me today, what is the main reason why you relaunched Berthoud, it's really the respect and the passion that I felt for this watchmaker, and the fact that we didn't want his name to be completely forgotten. Because I think he, just as some other great watchmakers, Berthoud really deserves to be known, even if he's only known to what we call watch aficionados and collectors, like some of you are. And yes, it's a great pleasure for us tonight to explain you more about Berthoud, and obviously to answer some of your questions. So far for my introduction, and I will pass the word on to Vincent. And I hope that I didn't forget anything important. But thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you. So let's discover first the history of Mr. Berthoud and see in details what he has done in the field of marine chronometers. On March 18, 1727, the Berthoud family announced the birth of their fifth and last child, Ferdinand. They cannot imagine that he will play an important role in the history of watchmaking, and that he will go exceptional times from the Enlightenments to the empire through the French Revolution. Ferdinand Berthoud, as Mr. Scheufele mentioned, is born very close from Fleurier in a small village called Couvet that is in the township of Neuchâtel in Switzerland. This is the valley that we call Val de Travers. That is a place of very famous watchmaker, yesterday like today. Ferdinand Berthoud received a solid education in mathematics and literature. He is 14 when he began servicing an apprenticeship with his brother, Jean-Henri, that is an expert watchmaker and clockmaker. 4 years after, he obtained his certificate with a mention of excellence. Ferdinand Berthoud is only 18 when he moves to Paris, where he is going to exercise his talents as a companion to the master watchmaker of his time. He will work many years for the famous Julien Leroy, that was the clockmaker of the King Louis XV. If you look at the back of this picture, you see the Ile de la Cité, where all the watchmakers and the jewelers used to have their workshops. Yes. During the reign of Louis XV, Paris is undergoing an unprecedented period of intellectual influence and scientific inquiry known as les Lumières, or the Enlightenment. During that period, the Royal Academy of Science will play a major role in the research and in the dissemination of knowledge. 7 years after his arrival in Paris, Ferdinand Berthoud submits a memoir to the Academy of Science relating to the construction of a long case equation clock marking leap year and also solar and mean time. This was a first at this time to have a clock, precision clock that display all this information at the same time. This masterpiece is now permanently exhibited in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. One year after presenting this clock, Ferdinand Berthoud, by a special favor of the King Louis XV, received the title of Master Watchmaker. Since then, he can sign his work. He can also open a workshop and hire workers. He will establish, of course, in the La Cité, next to the workshop of his mentor, Julien Leroy. One of the most famous workers he will employ as a watchmaker is Mr. Abraham Louis Breguet. Ferdinand Berthoud, that is very close from the world of the academy, and also that spent time in the famous Salon Parisien, is quickly noticed by the most influential members of the academy, and is chosen to write several reference articles about the watchmaking in the new Encyclopedia of Diderot and d'Alembert. This is a reference book for at that time, and you know that this encyclopedia will still live until today. Ferdinand Berthoud, in 1759, published his first book. It is a small booklet, The Art of Operating and Adjusting Clocks and Watches for those who have no knowledge or no horological knowledge. This small booklet will become a bestseller and will be translated in English, German, and Spanish, and published several times during the 18th century. In the 18th century, transoceanic travels grew significantly. The development of a reliable marine chronometer, allowing to calculate longitude at sea, becomes of strategic importance for safe navigation. To calculate longitude, it is necessary to compare the local time with the times of reference, and therefore you need a very accurate and reliable timekeeper. The difference gives the relative east-west position at sea at the rate of 1 degree of longitude for every 4 minutes of time. Consequently, 1 minute of time represents a distance of 15 nautical miles, about 28 kilometer distance. So you understand why your marine chronometer must be extremely precise if you want to have a chance to travel safely at sea. Sir John Harrison is the first to solve the longitude matter on behalf of England. He is awarded the famous Longitude Act Prize edited by the British Board of Longitude in 1714. This H4 is a sea watch, is not a real marine chronometer, but it is the first timekeeper that allows to calculate the longitude with an error by only 5 seconds. And that after 4 months trip to Jamaica. Ferdinand Berthoud is also entered into the competition in 1760, 10 years before John Arnold. He presented to the Royal Academy of Science a project related to the construction of a marine clock, the Montre Marine #1. This huge, heavy machine is powered by fusee and chain and has 24-hour power reserve. This clock, marine clock, shows 2 horizontal balances suspended by springs. His balance spring is compensated by a griderian device. It is also, as you can notice, suspended by a frame. This frame is the ancestor of the gimbal. This clock is permanently exhibited in Paris in the Museum of Art and Crafts. In 1763, Ferdinand published a large book of nearly 1,000 pages with 38 engraved plates. In this book, he sets out his ideas, relates his trial and results, and describe in details the clock he executed. Actually, this book was dedicated to the artist, that means the watchmaker, and the amateur, those who have interest for marine chronometers. And this book will be very helpful to the watchmaker of his time that will benefit from all the experience Berthoud has made. In 1763, the king sent Ferdinand Berthoud to London to observe the work of George Harrison. Of course, he will have no chance to see the famous H4 sea watch, but he will make the most of his time to campaign for his election to the Royal Society. 1 year after, by virtue of the importance of his work and his publications in the field of watchmaking, he will become a corresponding member of the Royal Society. Ferdinand Berthoud will be extremely proud about this first honor of many to come in his life. During the following years, Ferdinand Berthoud will make a lot of experimentations. He will create various clocks and present them to the Academy. Each of these clocks has a different regulating organ. The number 2 and 3 have a grasshopper escapement that is directly influenced by the work of Harrison. But already the number 4 has a different escapement, a rake anchor escapement. Then the number 6 has a cylinder escapement, and the number 7, a deadbeat escapement. Ferdinand Berthoud really tried to find the way to have the most accurate chronometer and was still not satisfied about these watches. Finally, in 1767, he realizes 2 important timekeepers, the number 6 and 8. These clocks are weight driven. They have a balance spring with a temperature compensated Griderian device and a balance wheel with movable masses that allows to modify their moment of inertia. Both have a detent escapement invented by Ferdinand Berthoud that he named vibration libre escapement, free vibration escapement. You see here on this device, technical rendering here, this famous vibration libre escapement. He also created and develops various specialist tools. Especially, he produced the very first gimbal device that allows to keep the movement in horizontal position during navigation. In 1768, the king asked Marquis de Fleurieu to test the marine chronometers 6 and 8 at sea and the clocks will be tested during a 12-month journey from Rochefort in France to Santo Domingo. During that trip, the marine chronometer number 8 will allow to calculate the longitude to the nearest half a degree, corresponding to an error of 1/8 degree after 287 days at sea. Actually, if you compare the result with the one of the H4 from Harrison, you see that the marine chronometer from Berthoud, the number 8, was more accurate. The results of all the observations made during this voyage was published in details 5 years later in 1773 under the title Voyage Made by Order to the King. In 1770, Ferdinand Berthoud is awarded the most prestigious position and received the title of watchmaker mechanic to the king and the navy. He became the exclusive supplier of marine chronometer for the king of France and the navy, of course. The king ordered him 20 longitude clocks, and to enable him to carry out this work, he gives him an annual pension of £3,000, what is a lot of money for the time of Berthoud. The Navy also provides Ferdinand Berthoud 2 workshops, one in Paris at the Louvre and one in Brest to store and to maintain the marine chronometers between each expedition at sea. Three years later, Ferdinand Berthoud published a major book about marine chronometers. In this book, he described all the elements required to build a marine clock and to use it at sea, and how you must use it to determine the longitude. Now, this is typical of Ferdinand Berthoud, this willingness to share his knowledge. It shows that he's a real child of the Enlightenment. He wants all his research and trials to benefit from the scientists of his time and the other watchmakers, so that they can improve the work and bring better solutions for the future. This is something extremely rare in the history, because usually scientists, and especially watchmakers, never share their knowledge. Ferdinand Berthoud quickly developed smaller timekeepers. And you can see here a beautiful example of one of these marine clock, the number 6, that is kept in the Lucille collection in Fleurier. During 30 years, during 1760 to 1787, Ferdinand Berthoud will produce 45 marine chronometers. And he will use 20 different calibers, from which he will develop 2 escapements from his own. At the end of his life, he publishes his most important work, History of Time Measurement by Clocks. This is a 2-volume book with 23 beautiful etchings. In this book, he demonstrates his exceptional knowledge of the art of horological mechanics. You will just remark something, that today, Ferdinand Berthoud, on the title of the book, signs that he is mechanical to the marine, member of the Institut National of France, and member of the Royal Society in London. This book was published after the French Revolution, at the beginning of the career of a certain Napoleon. This book will serve as a reference in Swiss watchmaking school until the 1950s. Ferdinand Berthoud died at the age of 18 in Groslay in France, a small village where he retired. The village is quite close to Paris, and during the French Revolution he bought a house to be more quiet and to keep on his work. He left an amazing body of work in the field of marine chronometers, but also decorative watches and clocks, specialist tools and scientific measuring instruments, as well as over 4,000 pages of specialist articles and 120 engraved plates. He is known as the watchmaker of the explorers because his longitude clocks will be used by the French Navy during the 18th and 19th century for all the major cartographic expeditions around the world. It's time now to discover the new collection we introduced this year, the Chronometer FB2RE. In 2020, we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the accession of Ferdinand Berthoud to his title of Clockmaker to the King. On this occasion, 5 years after the introduction of our first watch, the FB1 chronometer, we present a new collection, the FB2RE. This new chronometer is directly inspired by the marine clock number 6. It reinterprets its design and his architecture. The case of the chronometer FB2 is built according to the same principles as the marine clock number 6. A central round cylinder, water resistant to 30 meters, houses the movement. The lugs are assembled to the case middle by bolts, with bolts. And a large porthole at 10 o'clock allows to see inside the movement. Also, a large dial crafted in grand feu enamel dial allows the perfect display of the time. On top of that, a 9mm uncoupling crown protects the movement against overwinding. The dial design, as you can see, reproduces the design of the longitude clock number 6. The dial is made of two parts. You have one flat central disc that houses the hour, minute, hand, and you have an external element that is bombé, that is curved, and that allows to display the graduated scale. What makes this dial truly exceptional is that it is made of grand feu enamel, including all the marks, and that despite its bombé surface. For the perfect adjustment of the two elements, the dial couldn't be crafted in gold. So we used traditional steel, a certain steel alloy, to craft this element before to enamel them, exactly like Ferdinand Berthoud was making in his long case equation clock that you can see in various museums around the world. The chronometer V2 introduced a new movement that combines fusée and chain transmission with a 1 second remontoir d'égalité. The remontoir d'égalité, as you know, is a device that was introduced before the tourbillon that will be invited by Mr. Breguet. In his last book, Ferdinand Berthoud described the remontoir as an ingenious mechanism, as precise as difficult to achieve. The movement is built according to an architecture that is unique in contemporary watchmaking. Its bridges are supported by stylized pillars. The movement has 1,200 parts, of which 790 are dedicated to the chain. This chain is about 30 centimeters long. Our watchmaker needs about 1 day to assemble one chain by hand. We also need about 200 hours to fully decorate all the elements of the movement by hand, using exclusively tools that Mr. Berthoud could have on his desk in the 18th century. After that, each part is controlled with a magnifying glass that emphasizes 6.7 times. When a watch bears the name as prestigious as Ferdinand Berthoud, the level of quality must be really outstanding. The fusée and chain we use in our movement is the oldest solution developed to ensure constant force to the escapement. Each Ferdinand Berthoud watch has fusée and chain inside. What makes our fusée and chain absolutely unique is that it is suspended. As you can see on this picture, the barrel and the fusée are not screwed by any bridge or any screw from the top. Both elements are fixed from below, from the main plate. This construction is of course patented and allows a slimmer movement, but is of course difficult to implement. Because when you consider that when we put in place the chain, the torque between the two elements is about 3 kilos. The unique architecture of the FB2 movement highlights a fascinating play in symmetry between the constant force fusée and chain device and the regulating organ. the beauty of the wall is enhanced by the simplicity of the finishing. The bridges are simply frosted. The bridges made in nickel silver are frosted by hand, and this is an extremely difficult technique. That is a category of manual graining using a brush, what gives a beautiful shine to the bridges and makes the surface extremely clean. The movement has two distinctive constant force devices. First, the fusée and chain, but also the 1 second remontoir d'égalité. This remontoir is designed to store a small amount of energy in a secondary hairspring. This energy is then delivered to the balance wheel via the escapement in a perfectly stable way. The purpose of this remontoir is to increase the movement accuracy by evening out irregularities created when the teeth mesh. The two constant force devices in this movement play a different role. As you can see here on green, the barrel provides the main energy to the movement. Inside, the mainspring provides 83-hour power reserve. From this power reserve, the fusée, that is in blue here, only use the most stable part of this energy. For this FB2 watch, we have a power reserve of 50 hours. Then when the energy is transmitted from the fusée to the remontoir device, the going train wheel creates irregularities because of the famous teeth mesh. And the remontoir d'égalité allows to adjust these irregularities. Of course, they are of a very low level, very small level, but as our movements are officially chronometer certified by the COSC, it makes a difference in terms of accuracy. The FB2 remontoir operates on a 1 second cycle, allowing to obtain chronometric precision. Thus, the escapement receives the same energy at each oscillations of the balance wheel, representing 5 oscillations per second or 18,000 vibrations per hour. The remontoir itself is perfectly operational from the very first to the last second of this 50-hour power reserve. The low frequency we use of 2.5 Hz allows to reduce the energy consumption, but of course makes the life of our watchmakers extremely difficult in terms of adjusting. The specificity of the FB2 remontoir is that it is fitted concentrically with the escape wheel, no spring in between these two elements. And this direct connection with the escapement reduces the frictions. The energy from the fusée is therefore transmitted to the remontoir spring by the means of a triangular cam. And this cam, as you can see, is coaxial to the escapement. The ruby cam, this triangular cam, is made of synthetic ruby. It is shaped by hand, this famous shape known triangle de Relaunching. In addition to being spectacular, the use of the synthetic ruby allows to avoid use of oiling. And of course, it helps a lot regarding the aging of the mechanic. The chronometer FB2 displays a natural deadbeat or jumping seconds that is provided directly by the 1 second remontoir d'égalité. So that to reduce the weight driven by the remontoir, the second hand has been crafted in titanium. Its weight is only 1/100th of a gram. The caliber, FB.TFC, the caliber is equipped with an oversized 12mm diameter balance wheel with an aerodynamic shape. The two-spoke balance wheel has 4 inertia screws that guarantee its stability. Despite its low frequency, the movement is chronometer certified by the CESC. What is a real achievement when it comes to such complicated calibers? On top of the cost certification, we apply for an additional external test performed in Fleurier that check the accuracy and the stability of the watch. It is called the Fleury test. This Fleury test is conducted on a robotic simulator controlled by GPS. It reproduces the multiple human dynamics and recreates the different accelerations during the entire power reserve of the movement. This dynamic test is performed on the watch during its 50-hour power reserve, while the COSC is performed on the movement during 15 days. On this graph, you can see the deviations observed on 3 different watches produced since the beginning of this year until a couple of weeks before. The average deviation of 0.5 seconds shows the exceptional level of isochronism brought by the 1 second remontoir d'égalité of the movement. The FB2 RE chronometer is produced in 2 limited edition of 10 watches, one in rose gold with a black enamel dial and one in white gold with a white enamel dial. We will deliver the first watch in October to our exclusive partner in New York, Cellini Jewelers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lapaire, for this incredible lecture. I think we have a few questions lined up. And if I may, I'd like to ask you the first question. You mentioned that Ferdinand Berthoud traveled to England to inspect John Harrison's marine chronometers. Is there any evidence or anything in writing that says what their relationship was like? Because I imagine on one hand, they are competitors, but on the other hand, they may be very friendly because they're working on a lot of the same technology. Is there any information on what their relationship was like?
Alors, actually, yes, it is a lot of information about this published by the Railroad Society. When Ferdinand Berthoud arrived in London, he asked some friends from the Royal Academy to help him, to convince George Harrison to show him the H4. He received an offer from George Harrison to show him the H3, not the 4. And he asked a lot of money. Then Ferdinand Berthoud write to the king and tell him, okay, Mr. Harrison is ready to show me the H3, but not the H4 for a large amount. And the king say, no way, we don't want to accept this deal. And consequently, Mr. Berthoud starts to talk with some of the top watchmakers of this time that were already members of the Royal Society, that helped them to understand how the physical principles behind the H4. And that's why Ferdinand Berthoud could understand how it works, and especially the work done in the field of grasshopper escapement that he tried in some of his watches.
All right, thank you for that. Next up, we have a question from Tomohiro Oda. This is a quick question that I can answer. He asked, do you plan to make the slides available to us later? Yes, all of these lectures are recorded and they are available on our website, actually tomorrow for members and the general public in 2 months. So watch on our website if you'd like to watch the lecture again. Next up, we have a question from Bob Frischman. Bob Frischman says, some years ago, I purchased at a Christie's book auction in New York City an original copy of Berthoud's 1773 treatise of marine horology, complete with its many fold-out technical drawings. He says the text is, of course, in French, and he's thought of translating it, at least some of this translation work. And he asks, has this book already been translated? Would it be worthwhile to translate it now? And should it be more widely available to English speakers?
Excellent questions. I know that most of the books written by Berthoud have been translated in English, in Spanish, in German, even some in Portuguese. So if you are extremely lucky, you can find an original edition in English, but they are quite rare. What is difficult when you read the Ferdinand books, I know that because I read most of them in details, is that the French he used is old French. It's like the Old English from the 18th century. It's a lot of wording that are quite difficult to understand. So it's true that if you try to translate these antique books by yourself, it's quite a challenge.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have a question from John Edwards. John asks, how did you determine the correct steel to use for the substrate of the Grand Fou enamel dial? What technical challenges had to be overcome to avoid the customary need for counter enamel on the back of the dial in order to keep it so thin?
Yes, it was a complicated matter. But finally, we have analyzed the steel used by Berthoud in antique wall clock. Maybe you can see here from behind, you have one of these wall clock here signed by Louis Berthoud, the nephew of Ferdinand. And on the dial, at the time, they were not using gold. It would have been too expensive. So they were using a kind of steel alloy. And it was quite actually easy to analyze this alloy and to ask a specialized supplier in Switzerland to supply us the raw material to make the dial plate. That was the easiest part, because then the enamel to be crafted on a Bombay surface, this is the nightmare.
I can imagine that would be very difficult. Next up, we have a question from Paul Nelson. Paul asks, why are modern marine chronometers no longer encased in a gimbal system?
I have no idea. The modern marine chronometers I could see that are still in use. Usually on ships, you always have, of course, the GPS system to calculate your position. But I remember that they are constrained to have also a mechanical marine chronometer and a sextant to be able to calculate the longitude if the GPS is no longer working. And the only marine chronometer, modern one I could see produced in France, they still have a gimbal device. But maybe some of them no more, because the movement is stable enough. It's only a matter of stability of the movement.
Well, that makes sense to me. It seems like the gimbal system is just no longer necessary for a precise marine chronometer.
Probably no more, yes, no longer.
All right, thank you. I'm noticing that a few participants are raising their hands to ask questions. I'd like to ask instead, please just type your question directly into the Q&A box, and then I will read them in order to Mr. Lapaire. So next up, we have a question from Jeffrey Wilk, and he asks if Chronometry Ferdinand Berthoud would ever consider making larger batches of watches, larger numbers of watches.
Well, today we produce about 35, 40 watches per year, because we spend a lot of time in hand decoration of the parts. And also the caliber we use are complex, tested externally, as I mentioned, to the cask, and then also most of the time we have a double check with the flurry test. So it's a long process, and we have a small team. Today we prefer to concentrate on high quality, present new movements and new design, than increase the quantity. We want these Berthoud watches to be real luxury, rare watches that are not easy to find, and that's the case. In the US, the only retailer is Chiellini. So it's extremely difficult actually to find our watches, but that's part of, I would say, the definition of the luxury.
Absolutely. Next up, we have a question from Carolina Navarro. Carolina asks, she mentions that you were speaking about Berthoud's writing, especially his early works like The Art of Operating. And she asks, were these books meant to be educational material for future watchmakers or to sell? What was the idea behind Berthoud's writing? Why was he so generous with his knowledge?
It was a double idea. First, I would say he's also a great marketing man, because he understands that by sharing his knowledge, he was also making his advertisement. It was not only by pure philosophy that he wanted to share so much about his work, but it was also a way that everybody would recognize his contribution in the world of horlogerie, in the world of clock watchmaking. That was, I believe, I could imagine a double target for him.
Okay. All right. How are you doing? Do you want to keep going with questions?
Yes.
All right. We've got
Perfect.
We've got a lot of people asking questions today, which is great to see.
Thank you for that.
Yes. So next up, we have a question from Praveen Kanan. Praveen asks, did the team consider using 2 mainspring barrels to increase the power reserve to the full 80 hours instead of the 50 hours, which is the optimal power curve?
Sorry, I couldn't hear very well the question.
So Praveen is asking about power reserve on the watches. He's asking,
on the modern watch?
Yes, on the modern watches. So did the team consider using 2 mainspring barrels to increase the power reserve to 80 hours instead of 50 hours? What was the thought behind the power reserve of the modern watches?
It's always a matter of balance. If you have a lot of power reserve, you have a bigger movement. And with a fusing chain, you cannot have a bigger balance. Actually, the watch starts to be huge. So you have to define a reasonable size that gives an excellent chronometric performance, because you can have more power reserve. We could increase the power reserve because the barrel, we have 80-hour total power reserve. But then it would be, the precision of the watch would be lower. And we really wanted to have the most accurate and most stable energy possible. And this is always, in any watch, the matter of the balance of the frequency, the power reserve, and the accuracy, the size of the balance wheel also. If you have more power reserve, well, it has an impact on all this chain, and it's a decision matter at the beginning of the development. Usually that's something we say, okay, what is acceptable? And we say, because of the size, okay, maximum 50 hours.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, we have a question from Chris D. Chris asks, well, he first says, many thanks for a wonderful lecture. And he asks, I'm wondering why, with the Égalité spring, there is a need for the fusée. why do we need both the égalité spring and the fusée? Why do we need both in one watch?
Both the remontoir and the fusée. Actually, on the first watch, we have the remontoir, we have the fusée and chain device and the tourbillon. That looks more logical. Here, as we wanted to pay tribute to the wordings of Ferdinand Berthoud in his last book about the remontoir, we decided to create a new movement that would integrating a remontoir d'égalité. And it's true that normally with remontoir d'égalité, that is already a constant force device, you don't need the fusée and chain. And I must confess, the first trial we have done, we used a standard barrel. And we discovered that it was working, but the chronometric performance were not excellent. That's why we completely reworked the fusée and chain of the FB1 watch to have a new fusée and chain device for the FB2 adapted to the remontoir to reach this amazing chronometric performance that we prove with the Fleury tests. So it's a real benefit. Is not just for marketing or for the beauty to have both technical device inside. It's a real benefit for the accuracy. Remember that for us, bearing the name of Berthoud, accuracy and especially the display at the center of the watch is our first preoccupation.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, we have a question from Keith Lobo. Keith writes, Abraham Louis Breguet is widely regarded as a watchmaking genius. Were any of his inventions actually developed while he was apprenticing under Ferdinand Berthoud? If so, was credit also given to Berthoud for those inventions?
When you visit the Museum of Art and Crafts in Paris, you can see that at the end of the exhibition, the Ferdinand Berthoud complete workshop that is permanently exhibited, you certainly notice two small marine chronometers. One is signed by the nephew of Ferdinand Berthoud, Louis Berthoud, and the next one is signed by Abraham Louis Breguet, and they look exactly the same. They are totally similar. They are school marine chronometers produced under the leadership of Ferdinand Berthoud. And of course, Breguet, that was a genius, nothing to say, learned a lot from Berthoud. And actually, he was extremely proud that he worked for Berthoud. Then, like Ferdinand Berthoud and any watchmaker, he always takes something or develops something working on another workshop. When Berthoud presented his first Laplace equation clock to the king, he was working for Julien Leroy. So he also at that time learned from Julien Leroy to develop something from his own, bearing his name. That's life, so no problem with that.
Okay, next up, well, I just want to say thank you for all of these questions. We have so many questions coming in, so thank you to all of the people tuned in from all over the world asking these questions today. Next up, we have another question from Bob Frischman. Bob Frischman asks, are there any Berthoud descendants living today that we know of?
Well, Berthoud had two wives, but unfortunately, they deceased without giving any child to him. So Ferdinand Berthoud has no direct descendant, but his nephew and grandnephew keep on his work in the field of marine chronometry with great success. Actually, yes, some member belonging to the Berthoud global family, born in the region of Neuchâtel, exists, but I don't know if they are really direct descendants from this Berthoud family, maybe from other side, but today, no. After the death of Charles-Auguste Berthoud, that was a teacher in Paris in the watchmaking school and a member of the Longitude board in France. Not a single watch have be signed with the name of Berthoud.
Okay. Next up, it's not a question, but a statement. Fortunat Müller-Markay, he seconds Bob Frischman's requests, and he encourages a publication of a modern English language translation of the Berthoud publication. So just thought I would throw that one out there.
That's a good idea. We just have to find a donator to do it. Then it's quite easy for us to translate it.
I think we have time for just one more question here, because we're running up on the 1 hour length of the meeting. So our last question for today's lecture is from Thomas Londonio. Thomas asks, well, first he says, thank you for the wonderful lecture. And then he asks, which books do you recommend to keep learning about the legacy of Ferdinand Berthoud?
The only book detailed book existing about Ferdinand Berthoud was published by the Museum de la Chaux-de-Fonds, Museum of Watchmaking in La Chaux-de-Fonds, at the time of this 200th anniversary. This book, it's only published in French. And you can sometimes find some exemplar on the internet. It's a book about Ferdinand Berthoud, his history. Today, unfortunately, we are missing a complete book, recent book that would explain with more details and other sources the complete life of Berthoud. But it would be a huge book, because Mr. Berthoud has a very, very long and very important story. So we could speak hours about him.
Absolutely. Well, I want to wrap up today's meeting, today's lecture, and Mr. Lapaire, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I know it's evening time where you are in Switzerland. So,
yes, in Geneva.
So I could say have a great night, and I could say have a good afternoon to everyone here in the U.S. and for people joining us around the world. Thank you for joining. We're looking forward to our November lecture, which is scheduled for November 2nd. It will be at 7 p.m. New York time, and it's going to be featuring Joe Kirk from Grand Seiko. So thank you everyone for joining today. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you, Mr. Lapaire, for discussing the legacy of Ferdinand Berthoud with us.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure for me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.